All right, good afternoon. Welcome everyone. My name is Dinah Sbelgio Kinard. I'm one of the directors in the admission office at St. Edward's University, and it's wonderful to be with you here today. I know that we probably wish that we were all interacting and meeting in person on the Hilltop, and I hope that that will be happening very soon. For the last few months, St. Edward's University has been operating fully, but operating remotely, as most of us have been for the last few months in our lives. So we appreciate you taking the time to join us today for this application and essay workshop. We know that there are probably many questions that you have as you start thinking about working on your application for admission for the fall 21 class. And we want to make sure that you get a good head start on having those questions answered today. So you can get to work if you want to. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the webinar format. I'm sure that many of you have been using Zoom quite a bit over the last few months for some of your online schooling. And that's the format we're using today, webinar format, which will essentially allow you the opportunity to ask questions through the Q&A feature. So the chat feature has been turned off. We will not be using the chat. So any questions that you have for myself, for Mallory, for things during the presentation, please do enter through the Q&A. Mallory Mazzarella is our Assistant Director of Admission, and she is going to be presenting today about the application process and then also talking to you about how you can get started on working on your essay for the college application. And so that presentation will take about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end to get to all of the questions that you ask, either along the way or once we get to the end of the formal part of the presentation. So do hang tight if you submit a question. Just know that we will get to it towards the end of the presentation. Again, thank you for being here. I know we have people from all over the state of Texas, as well as a number of other states across the country represented. So thank you for joining us here today online. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my wonderful colleague in the admission office, Mallory Mazzarella, Assistant Director of Admission, and she'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, so thank you all so much again for being here. I'm going to, during the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video just so that you can focus on the information that's on the slides and see those full screen. But then at the end, when we get to the Q&A portion, I'll turn my camera back on so that we can have a little bit more of a conversation. I do want to go ahead and go over some of the information that we'll be discussing today. So we'll talk a little bit about the application process itself, the deadlines that you should be aware of, as well as documentation that you'll need to submit. But I also want to spend some time going into a little bit more depth about what we're looking for when we review your applications. What are some ways that you can showcase your personality, stand out, and let us get to know you in the process, as well as some expectations for what might happen after you submit your application, things that you might be considered for, and ways that we may communicate with you about what you've submitted and what the decision on your application is. And then we'll also give you some practical tips that you can think about as you're taking advantage of your time at home this summer to get an early start on your application, which you've already taken the first step in doing by just being here today. So to first discuss some of the application requirements, I saw that we did get a question already, and feel free to go ahead and submit your questions throughout the presentation. As Dinah said, we'll go ahead and answer them at the end when we get there. But we received a question about whether or not we accept Apply Texas, and we do accept Apply Texas. We also accept the Common application. Both of those can be sent to multiple colleges and universities. So as you're starting to narrow down your list of where you may want to apply, it can be helpful to know which applications different schools are accepting, and if there may be one that you can use for every school that's on your list. We also have our own St. Edward's application that's available on the website if you want to use that. And we don't have any preference between these three. The reason we accept multiple applications is really about making it as convenient for you as a student as possible. So if you're applying primarily to schools that take one of these applications in particular, or if maybe, especially for students who are out of state, if maybe other schools have more specialty ones and you want to use the St. Edward's application for us, we really want you to do what's most convenient for you. The bottom line is just that we want your application, so any format is fine. We also ask that you submit your application essay Any topic that's associated with the application that you're using is going to be fine. Most applications vary a little bit in what essay topics they offer you. And then we'll also ask for a letter of recommendation, an official transcript sent by your high school. And this year we've made the submission of SAT and ACT scores optional. This is a permanent change. A lot of schools have been offering this as sort of a temporary measure in light of the disruption to testing that's been caused by COVID-19. But this is something that we were already planning on doing before coronavirus hit. And so we're glad we were able to do it now, but it will be a permanent change. So if anyone is looking at this and is not planning to apply next year, but is further away, please know that we will still be test optional in the future. And we'll talk a little bit in more detail about what that means, but I would also stay tuned for more details as we get closer to the fall on exactly the details of what to expect with that test optional admission policy if you plan to use it. So application deadlines, just so that you can start thinking ahead for the fall. The early first review deadline is November 1st. If you submit your application by that date, then you are going to be one of the first applications that we review when we start submitting or when we start reviewing applications and releasing admission decisions. If you miss that deadline, the big one to aim for is December 1st. December 1st is really our kind of big fall deadline. If you get your application in by that date, you're likely to hear back possibly even before the holidays, but certainly within the first few weeks of the spring semester as we're coming back from the holiday break. And the earlier you hear back, and I really want to kind of make this clear, the earlier you hear back, the more time you have to work with us to answer questions about majors or programs you might be interested in, to develop a good understanding of what it would cost to attend, scholarships that you might be eligible for, and also to make sure that you're in the best position possible to be considered for all of those scholarships and aid. So we really do encourage you to go ahead and start working on your application as soon as it opens in the summer. You can start working on your essay even a little bit before that, since the topics tend to be similar from year to year, and then that will put you in the best position possible to get that application in early. But if you end up adding us to your list later on, if something comes up, if something, disrupts your plans and you end up applying a little bit later, or if maybe you're waiting on academic information, like if you really want your senior fall grades to be included, we do have application deadlines in February and in May as well. I would just encourage you, the earlier you can get it in, the better, both for you and for us, but please know that we can be flexible if you do need extra time. When we will review your application, we use what's called a holistic review process. You might hear that phrasing from other universities as well. And really what it means is that we want to paint a full picture of you as a student to understand whether you're prepared to succeed on our campus. And that's really the bottom line of what we're looking for. So we will look at your academic history, and that's probably the most important part of your application in terms of the curriculum that you've taken. Have you challenged yourself, particularly in areas that might relate to the fields that you're interested in studying? What is your GPA? What is your class rank? But we always want to review that within the context of your high school. So, GPA, rank, things like that, we're always looking at those. Are you going to a huge high school? Are you going to a high school that is really competitive, where maybe having a top 10% or top 5% class rank is extremely challenging? Have you taken advantage of difficult courses that have been offered to you, even if your school maybe doesn't offer as many of those AP or IB courses or dual credit courses as some other high schools might? And so it's really about not just the numbers on the page, but have you made the most of your college experience, and what are the trends over time in how you've grown as a student since starting high school and now getting ready to start college? We also really want you to spend some time on your essay. We'll go more in depth about some tips for that and things to think about. But since St. Edward's is a liberal arts university, we really value strong writing, and your ability to express yourself is going to be important for your success on our campus. We also really want to take the chance to get to know you through the essay. It's one of the only parts of the application that gives you a chance to showcase your personality. And so spend your time on it. Make sure that it really says what you want it to say and sounds how you want it to sound. Have other people read it before you send that to us. And especially, make sure that it's proofread for solid writing mechanics and grammar and spelling and all of that. And then we'll also look at other pieces of information that'll tell us a little bit more about you. So what have you been involved in college, or sorry, in high school? What are some of the experiences that you've had, opportunities that you've involved yourself in your community or in your school community itself? Your letter of recommendation, we require one, but you can submit more if you want to. And I would say, think strategically about those. If you are trying to decide how many rec letters do I need, as I said, we only require one, but if you think that there's more than one person that we need to hear from to really paint a thorough picture of who you are, what your experiences looked like, what your strengths are, then please submit as many as you need to kind of show us all of those elements of your academic life. But typically no more than 3 or 4. I would say beyond that, they start to kind of sound the same. And then, as I mentioned, test scores are also something that, since they're optional, give some thought to whether or not there's something that's going to add strength to your application. If it's something that you did really well on, go ahead and include it. But if you don't think that it's a good reflection of your strengths as a student, feel free to omit those from the process. And feel free to kind of work with your admission counselor more individually to understand whether or not you should submit those. And also your counselor at your high school may be able to help with that too. But to get a little bit more in depth here, the application essay is probably the most daunting part of the application. It's also probably one of the most important parts. So to give you a little bit of perspective on what it's like for us to read these, as I mentioned before, it's one of the only opportunities that we have to get to know you as a person. So make sure that you're telling us a story that really only you could tell us. We read a lot of essays and we read them in depth and we spend time with them, but we're moving through them very quickly in really high volume. So you'll want to make sure that whatever story you choose to tell is something that comes across easily and clearly and quickly. The essay is relatively short. It may seem long when you're writing it, but it's really only about a page to a page and a half of content. You really don't have a ton of space. So you want to make every sentence and every word count. I would also say, as part of that, try to focus on one event, one person, one example maybe of what it is that you want to get across to us. So to give you an example, lots of students might write about involvement in athletics. That's something that I think is a really, formative experience for a lot of students. It's something that means something to a lot of students. It's an experience where you might learn a lot about yourself and your values and some skills that might carry with you into college. But your essay is going to be a lot stronger if you're able to write about, for example, one specific coach that you had, or maybe one specific game, or even a specific play in a specific game that really serves as an example of the values that that sport has taught you, versus a more general essay where you're speaking about, your full 4-year experience of playing that sport in high school, or maybe listing different coaches or different experiences that you've had. And so that's really, when we say write an original essay, or write something distinctive, that's really what we're talking about. You don't need to have a once-in-a-lifetime experience to write a successful application essay. Most students don't have something like that. But what you can do is include details that make it really a story that only you could tell, even if it's an experience like being on an athletic team that many, many students will have over the course of their high school experience. And my final tip with this would be, please have someone else read your application essay before you submit it to us. And the reason for that is, well, really partially for proofreading, partially to make sure that it's grammatically sound and all of that. But I would really recommend having someone read it who maybe doesn't know the story that you're telling, like if you're writing about your experience in a particular class, maybe have a teacher from a different subject read that essay, or you know, have a teacher read it if it's something that's about your family that maybe your parents already know that story inside and out, because we will be reading your essay without context. You don't get the opportunity to kind of introduce it and tell us why you're writing about it or give us additional context. All we have is what you write. And so you want to make sure that someone reading it without that greater context understands what you're trying to say. And I would ask the person who reads it to tell you, well, if you didn't know me and all you saw was this essay, what would you think of me as a prospective college student? What would you think this essay says about me? And make sure that that aligns with how you want to be seen and what you think you bring to the table in the application process. And I do see that there's some questions that are starting to come in. That's great. Please continue to submit those as we go, and then we'll keep track of all of them and answer them at the very end. The other thing that I would say is, this is kind of an extension of the essay piece, but strike that balance between being yourself and being authentic, but being prepared and thinking critically about what you share with us. So like I said, we want to get to know you. We don't expect you to be perfect. We don't expect you to have a completely flawless, everything is perfect record. If anything, sometimes we want to see that you've maybe struggled with something and have built skills to get through that and move past it and move forward. And those will give you resilience in college. But as you're thinking about how authentic to be and what to share with us, keep in mind that we are evaluating you and we are evaluating your candidacy. And so you'll want to present those stories in a way that reflects well on you and shows that you have, you know, given thought to what that experience was like for you too. And the other thing that I would say, this doesn't have to be within the context of the essay, but if there's something else that maybe you really think is important for us to know, maybe an extenuating circumstance, maybe something related to coronavirus that impacted your grades, something related to your family or how you learn or your experience in school, please give us that context. It doesn't have to be in the essay. It could be in the additional information section if you're using the Common App. It could be in a rec letter. It could be in an extra personal statement, even if you want to submit something like that. But you can also just call and talk to us. We want to hear from you individually in this process. We want to get to know your family as well, but it makes such a difference when we're reading an application, when we've been able to actually speak to the student and maybe answer questions for you at some point or have a meeting with you, even if it's a socially distanced virtual meeting, if you're not able to come to campus. We really want to get to know you individually, and that'll help you stand out in the process as well. Finally, stay organized. All of the information that I'm giving you might be a little bit different from university to university. The deadlines certainly will. Some of what they want you to submit certainly will. And so stay on top of all of that. And if you forget something, it's going to be really helpful if we have a good way to get in touch with you. So make sure that we can, you're giving us an email address, a phone number that you actually monitor and that you stay on top of week to week, because if you're missing something or we need more information from you, that's how we're going to try to get it. And it's in your best interest to be able to send us more information if we reach out and ask for it. So to talk a little bit about application outcomes, we will notify you typically within about 4 to 6 weeks from the date that you complete your application. Some of the application outcomes are obvious, the things that you would expect from any school. You might be admitted to the university, yay, this is the goal. You may be placed on an admission wait list, which would give you, essentially lets us know that we want to review your application a little bit later, typically at the very end of the spring. If we have additional space in the class and are able to offer you a space at that time, you may be admitted then, but it's typically further down the road. Or you may be denied admission. If you are denied admission, we would encourage you to consider applying as a transfer student in the future if you're able to start someplace else and St. Edward's is eventually where you want to be. But we'll notify you of these decisions through your admission packet, which will be sent to you in the mail. It is if the design is the same as last year, it is bright, vibrant blue. It is very hard to miss. Please keep an eye out for it. But you will also be able to view that information online through your My Hilltop account. And that is something that you will gain login information for right after you submit the application. Sometimes students are not looking out for it at that stage. So please keep an eye on your email right after you submit that Apply Texas or Common App. You'll get an email from us inviting you to set up that account. Go ahead and do that, because that's going to be the easiest way to find your application, or to see if we're missing anything. Like if you request your transcript and it doesn't make it to us, you'll be able to see that on your My Hilltop account. But please keep in mind, outside of these 3 decisions here of admit, waitlist, or deny, we might reach out to you to ask for additional information. And so that's why I really emphasize being able to be reached, being available for communication. We may reach out to ask you if you can send, for example, more recent grades or a progress report or something else that might be beneficial to you in the application process. We're never going to ask you for more information if we think that it's going to hurt you. Typically, we ask you for more information when we think that it might help you out in the application process, whether that's making you more likely to be admitted or making you a better candidate for scholarships or something like that. So once you're admitted, like I said earlier, you have until May 1st to accept or decline your admission. If you apply super late in the year, you'll notice our final deadline was also May 1st. So if you apply on May 1st, we'll give you a little bit of extra time. But that should also help remind you how important it is to apply early, that you're just giving yourself more time before that deadline to consider everything. So as far as scholarships and aid, you'll be automatically considered for merit scholarships when you apply. So again, put thought into what you're submitting in your application, because that's also your application for scholarships at St. Edward's, at least. Every school is a little bit different on that, so please check with every school that you're applying to. But most will automatically consider you for at least something, but you don't have to opt in. When you receive your admission letter, if you are admitted, we will also let you know if you've been awarded a merit scholarship at that time. But then the other piece that is separate is we really encourage you to submit the application for financial aid. Most students will do that by submitting the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. That opens on October 1st every year. So a little bit after the application for admission will open, which is typically in August. And we would really encourage you to submit that. We do have alternatives available for families who are not eligible to apply via the FAFSA. There are some Texas state-specific ones or options for international students as well. We also really want to make sure that you understand it takes a little bit of extra time after you've been admitted to review the FAFSA. So you want to apply for admission first, then submit your financial aid application or submit it at the same time. And then you'll receive your admission decision back first, and a couple of weeks later, you'll receive that financial aid information back too. Sometimes we have students who are going, well, let me wait to apply for admission until I know about financial aid. You'll never hear from us if you do it that way. So admission first, financial aid second. And you will have a financial services advisor who is assigned to you. So in the same sense that you have an admission counselor who's assigned to you, who you might hear from, you'll also have someone to help you with the financial process, whether that's questions about how to submit the FAFSA, what you might be eligible for, or if it's questions about how to make the most of the funding that you've been offered, or whether or not to take advantage of loans, things like that. They are really helpful, and we'll be happy to work with you too. So some next steps for you as you're thinking ahead. We would love to have you come visit campus. Again, we're sorry that we can't be hosting you on campus right now this summer, but we do expect to hopefully be able to reopen campus for visits towards the end of the summer or the beginning of the fall. We can also, especially if you're local, you're welcome to come walk through campus by yourself right now. You won't be able to enter any buildings. We can't offer you a guided tour, but you can at least get a feel for it and spend some time outside if it's not too hot, and see our beautiful campus, which we're really excited to get back to as soon as we can. I would also say you can go ahead and start working on your application. The application itself will not open until typically August 1st is our opening date, but there are elements of it that you can do ahead of time, like going ahead and putting together your list of all of your activities that you've done in high school, how many hours per week, how many weeks per year, what year did you do them? All of that takes some time to put together. You can also start working on the essay. And if you are able to get that essay done before you go back to school in the fall, you will thank yourself later. Don't make it one more thing you have to work on when you also have essays for school and homework and extracurricular activities that you're doing. If you can do that essay over the summer, as much of a bummer as it is to do that when you could be outside or, spending time relaxing, it really does make your senior year a little bit easier. We would also really love to help you explore more about St. Edward's. So if there are majors that you want to know more about, if you want to talk to a current student or a professor or an athletic coach, please let us know. We can put you in touch with the right people. We're a small community. We want to get to know you. So we're always happy to hear from you in that respect. And then we do have an app on the ZME platform, which a lot of colleges and universities use to help connect prospective students or admitted students. You can talk to other students, you can ask questions there, you can talk to admission counselors there. There's a link on the screen for it, but you can also just download the ZME app and search for St. Edward's, I believe, or reach out to us if you have trouble setting that up. And then you can also reach out to Student Financial Services. So their contact information is on there, or you can search financial aid on the St. Edward's website and find them that way and reach out if you have questions about cost or FAFSA or any of that. So with that, I will go ahead and turn my video back on to get started with the Q&A portion. So I know that we had a few questions come in while we were going over the presentation. So yes, so we have a question about where your recommendation letter can come from. This student is specifically asking whether the recommendation letter can come from a school that you attended as an exchange student. I would say anyone who knows you in an academic context is qualified to write that one recommendation letter that's required. So it doesn't have to be a specific subject or a teacher from a specific place. I would say anyone who has taught you for any reason in high school is a good resource for that. And then if you want to submit additional letters from non-academic recommenders, like someone you've worked with in the community, an athletic coach, a theater or music director, someone like that, we are more than happy to hear from them as well. We just want to make sure that at least one of them is an academic source. And then I think we had another question. Dinah, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we have a question about how international students apply for financial aid, and that's a great question. So thank you for posing that. International students, first and foremost, are automatically considered for merit-based scholarships just the same as non-international students. I should also say this also applies to students who are undocumented. So whether a student is international or an undocumented student or a US citizen, all students will be considered for financial aid. I'm sorry, for merit-based scholarships. To be considered for financial aid as an international student, you would submit the CSS profile form. So while US citizens would submit the FAFSA form, and undocumented students would submit a paper copy of the FAFSA form, international students would submit the CSS profile. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. And please do submit any follow-up questions if you have follow-up questions related to that.
So another question that came up is we had a student ask about religious requirements. It's a really great question. So St. Edward's does not have specific religious requirements. We are a Catholic university. We do offer courses in things like Catholic studies. We do have a chapel on campus. We offer Mass for students who want that, but it's not something that you're required to participate in. The only requirement we have is that students take a class, one class that has something to do with the topic of religion, but you can study a wide range of different faiths and traditions, and it does not necessarily need to connect to your individual faith experience. That's something that's very personal, and we want to make sure that we're supporting students in any faith tradition, kind of regardless of what your belief system is when you come to campus. So, all right, we have another question about how to submit a teacher recommendation. It will depend on how you're applying for admission. So if you're applying via the Common App, I know that you can often upload that through Common App. You can identify those recommenders that way, and it'll come kind of along with your application. If you are applying via Apply Texas or the St. Edward's application, you probably want to have your recommender send that to us via email. So you can do that through the, I believe it's on this slide actually, the seu.admit@stedwards.edu email address. I would also check with your high school on this, because some high schools have a specific way that they want this done. Your college counselor may want to upload something via Naviance. They may want to send it through, if you use like Score or something like that. There are all these different softwares that your high school might be using, and they may have a framework that they want you to use as well.
While we're on the topic of teacher recommendations, Mallory, I know you talked about this a little bit during the presentation and some really helpful information, but I would just say to students, even right now during the summer, while your teachers are essentially kind of not working, I'm sure that some of you are still in contact with some of your teachers or will be very soon. If there was a teacher that was really important to you and is someone that you feel like you want to write a recommendation letter for your college application, it's okay to go ahead and reach out to that person and let them know that you would like them to write a letter for you, because the more time you can give someone to write the letter for you, the more likely they're going to say yes and be able to write that letter. Because I know that you know, so probably whoever your favorite teacher is probably the favorite teacher of a lot of students, and sometimes teachers get inundated with requests and may only be able to write X number of letters. So it's never too early to reach out to a teacher or a couple of people that you anticipate writing letters of recommendation for you, and just go ahead and kind of get on their schedule, if you will. So even though that letter might not be needed or not necessarily need to be turned into you for several months, you can go ahead and make that request now.
Thank you for that, Dinah. We really appreciate that. And I would say, you know, again, the more you can do early, the better. If you're wondering, should I do this now or in 3 weeks? Do it now, as a general rule in this whole process. And so we do have a question really quick about kind of the advantages of applying early. I think your question might have been cut off because it looks like it's, there's a piece that's missing from it, but I'll try to cover it more broadly. One of the advantages is hearing back earlier. Another one is making sure that you meet the priority deadline for scholarship consideration. Which we really, you know, we can consider for students, we can consider students for scholarships beyond that date, but it varies from year to year. We do consider students for admission on a rolling basis, which means that rather than kind of waiting all the way up until the deadline and releasing decisions at once, it'll depend on when you submit. And so that also means we kind of fill up over time. So the earlier you apply, just the more time you give us to work with you, and the better position you put yourself in to have the outcome that you're wanting to have. I also see a question about acceptance rate. I think this is something that's really helpful to talk about and helpful to understand. So thank you for asking that question. For us, we admit around 70 to 80% of students. It kind of depends from year to year, it varies. But there are a couple of different factors that go into acceptance rate. I think a lot of times students look at acceptance rate and they view it as, okay, what are my odds of getting in? Which is an element of that, but it can also be a measure of how many students are applying to the university at all, and the research that students are doing ahead of time. Of, you know, if most of the students who apply to your university are a good fit for your university, your acceptance rate will go up. If you have students applying from all over and some are a good fit and some aren't, it might go down. So as you're thinking about acceptance rate, as you're looking at different schools, a better way to understand your own likelihood of admission is to look at some of the average GPA, test scores, you know, involvements, things like that, that students are coming in with. And so we have some of that information available on the website. Your admission counselor will also have more specific information about kind of your high school. They'll have better context to understand where you're applying from. So if you're wondering, will I get in? There are some more precise ways of thinking about that. Let's see, a couple of other questions here. And we have another question about recommendation letters. So your teachers might know some of that. Your recommendation letters generally don't need to be super long. We see a pretty wide range, everything from a couple of paragraphs to a couple of pages. I would say your teacher probably has a good sense of that. You probably don't have room to like tell them, hey, I want it to be 2 pages, but there isn't a limit. So you don't need to worry about them writing something that's too long. I would say ask someone who knows you well enough that they'll have a lot to share and you should be fine on length.
I'd also kind of add to that, your recommendation really uses, serves a purpose of kind of like supporting the other documentation that you submit in your application. So your recommendation letter really provides some additional insights that we don't already know from your resume or from your transcript, right? So you want someone, as Mallory said, who knows you really well and kind of speak to who you are as a student, your character as a classmate and a colleague, your work ethic as a student. Those are the things that are not necessarily enumerated on a resume of activities, right? Or not necessarily self-evident in a GPA. And so really someone that you have a connection with personally in terms of a personal rapport. It doesn't have to be someone, a teacher that you're buddies with necessarily, right? But someone who can really kind of speak to your character as a student and what you contribute to the classroom environment is really kind of the most effective recommendation letters. And they don't have to be long. So again, recommendation letters can sometimes, be too long if they're really just kind of saying all of the things that you're involved in, which you've already listed on your resume. It's okay if they reference some of the activities that you're involved in and they use that as commentary to, expand on who you are as a student and as a young person. But they don't necessarily need to kind of regurgitate things that are already available in other parts of your application, if that makes sense. Some of the best recommendation letters are really just a couple of paragraphs long, so.
Exactly. And I think one final thing to think about is that sometimes the recommendation letter doesn't have to be from, to kind of go off, they don't have to be your buddy. Sometimes some of the most effective recommendation letters are even from teachers and students or teachers and subjects that you've struggled with. Maybe math is not your strong suit, but you worked really hard in the class and you were really dedicated and came in for extra help. And maybe that teacher can offer context to a lower grade on your transcript or say, hey, this student earned a C in my class, but I really appreciated their diligence and they were really polite and really responsible. And I think that speaks to their preparation for college, that kind of thing too. So there's a lot that you can use the recommendation letter for to showcase different parts of your application.
And just one final thing about recommendation letters, even though we only require one, and many colleges only require 1 letter, some colleges require 2 or 3 letters, you'll want to certainly make sure that you understand for every college you're applying to what the requirement is in terms of recommendation letter. So even though we only require 1 recommendation letter that's academic in nature, meaning that it's from a teacher or a high school counselor, you can always submit additional letters of recommendation. And we even encourage students, if they want to have their parents write a letter of recommendation for them. We have had many parent letters of recommendation over the years, and sometimes those are the most interesting ones to read because they really do kind of shed some light and insight into who you are that's very different from people that you might know in activities or in the classroom environment. So hopefully all of you have a favorable relationship with your parents and can feel comfortable asking them for a letter of recommendation if you feel like that's something you want to do. So just wanted to let you know that if you have a parent who's eager to write a letter of recommendation for you, that's okay. Just make sure that you are the person who's kind of driving the application process itself, right? So that your parent's not necessarily doing any other part of the application for you, just to be clear.
Yeah, and I think that actually connects. We got a question about what homeschooled students should consider. That's maybe the more common situation where we might see a letter from a parent if your parent is your teacher and kind of has to be the one to speak to that side of things that you've done. I would say in a case like that, if there's someone else that you can ask in addition to your parent, that's helpful just because they love you. Your teachers probably love you too, but we want to get a broader picture of your background and your preparation. But the other thing I would say, we do have a counselor who works specifically with our homeschooled students. And so they will be able to give you information about how to document your grade information, your transcripts, things like that. I would encourage you to reach out to them directly, reach out to us, and we can put you in contact with the right person. For dual credit students, especially if it's a blend of like homeschool and dual credit that you're doing, your dual credit should transfer. We will honor credit from pretty much any accredited university that you have done that credit with. You just want to make sure that you'll send us a self-reported transcript or an unofficial one for the review process if it's not already showing up on your high school transcript. And then if you enroll, you'll need to send a final official transcript so that we can award you credit for those dual credit courses that you've completed. And same goes for AP and IB. We will award credit hours at St. Edward's for those as well.
So we have a question about just kind of in general, what's the size of the campus, how many people attend St. Edward's? And I know that we didn't necessarily touch on that in this presentation since this was focused just on the application. So let's take a minute to talk about that. And please do add in any other questions, things you want to know about St. Edward's, even if it's irrelevant to the topic of the application essay workshop itself. So we're here to answer any questions you may have. Typically, we have a total undergraduate enrollment at the university of about 3,600 students. Each year, we have a freshman class that can range anywhere from 600 to 700 students, depending on the year. So that gives you a sense of the size of your incoming cohort, if you will, at the university. We are a residential university, so most of our students live on campus, certainly in the first year and even first couple of years. And we do have a fair number of students who continue to live on campus even in junior and senior year as well. So we are a residential campus community. Our classes are small, and that's certainly a reason why many students look to apply to St. Edward's, because they want to have that small classroom experience and that connection with other students and with their faculty members. On average, our classes are 19 students in size. So you're going to be in a classroom that's probably similar in size or sometimes even smaller than classes that you were in high school. You're not going to be in big lecture style auditoriums and halls with 100 or a couple of hundred students at St. Edward's. So your classes are small, you have personal attention from your faculty members. We don't have any teaching assistants who teach classes at St. Edward's. So you are taught by a full or part-time faculty member, and it's certainly a very personalized environment. But we are a campus community, it's home, and we have for those of you who've maybe been to our campus know this, we're uniquely positioned in that we are just 3 miles from downtown Austin. So, just literally a 10-minute bike ride from the epicenter of everything that is fun and to do in Austin. But our campus itself is on a hill, hence our mascot, the Hilltoppers. So we're on this kind of hilltop, if you will, right in the middle of the city that provides really a buffer from the city. So while we are an urban campus and our students have close proximity to go shopping, to go out, to go to a concert, to go lay on a blanket and enjoy the beautiful parks in Austin, when you're on the campus itself, you don't feel like the city of Austin is coming onto your campus. And so it's really kind of a unique, I think, really best of both worlds experience for students who want to have that residential, traditional campus experience, but yet still want to have access to lots of fun things to do, lots of internship opportunities, some great experiences outside of the campus environment, but still feel very much like they're part of a community and that they're safe and that they're in a home, if you will. So hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture of our campus. We are Division II in athletics. We have a number of club sports as well as intramural programs. We do have an emphasis on student activities and student organizations. Our students get very, very involved in campus, and we have a big emphasis on study abroad. So about 5% of our student body is international, coming from over 50 different countries. And we do have a lot of students who go and spend time abroad for a summer or a semester, an entire year, when they can. Certainly right now that's obviously very limited, but under normal circumstances, we have a very international influence at St. Edward's, both among our domestic students and from the international students. And just further, I would add that in general, we are largely Texan. You know, Austin's in the middle of a very large state. About 70% of our student body is from Texas. But we have over 20%, 22% or so of our student body that comes from all over the US, and then again, a population of international students as well. So you'll meet a lot of people from all over the state of Texas, probably from your hometown if you're from Texas or your home area, but you'll also meet a lot of people from all over the country as well. And if you're one of the students joining us today from out of state, just know that you'll get to meet a lot of Texans, but you're also going to meet a lot of people from other states and other countries as well at St. Edward's. So hopefully that paints a picture for you of what the campus is like, and please do contribute any other questions and follow up if you have them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll also add that, you know, with the size of Texas, 70% Texan really doesn't speak to kind of just the diversity of experiences and backgrounds that exist in Texas as well. I say that as someone who's from Texas. I'm from Austin, born and raised here, and you drive a couple hours and you're in a completely different type of environment, different type of culture. So we have a question about events and opportunities for Catholic students on our campus. Again, I think you really will find that experience if you're looking for that. We do offer things like retreats. There are also opportunities to get involved in discussion groups or reading groups on campus. You'll also, you know, really quickly find a Catholic community just by attending some of the Mass services that are on campus too. Another thing that I think is a great opportunity for Catholic students and students from other backgrounds is community service. We have a really excellent tradition of community service on our campus, and that can look really different. There are a lot of different types of things that might mean. We have a student organization called SERVE that does ongoing projects in the Austin area. So it might be something that you can sign up for to just do a weekend, but a lot of what SERVE does is actually longer term placements in the Austin area where you're doing something every week or twice a week with the same organization and really kind of getting to know something. And while that's not a religious involvement experience specifically, I know that a lot of students who are involved in spiritual organizations on campus also really enjoy kind of utilizing that as a way of developing their faith and so on and so forth. And we do have opportunities to travel through study abroad as well, or sorry, through community service as well, whether that's domestic trips and retreats or trips abroad. And again, you don't have to be, they're not, you know, explicitly religious in nature. It's not something that you should feel like you can't do unless you're coming from a religious background. But I think that a lot of students who are involved in spiritual organizations or Catholic organizations on campus also really benefit from being part of some of those experiences.
I'll just add to that a little bit too, just to give you a sense of kind of the tradition of our Catholic character. We were founded in 1885 by Father Edward Sorin, who is a Holy Cross priest, and the Holy Cross Order of Brothers specifically is the order that runs St. Edward's University. Father Edward Sorin also founded the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. I'm sure some of you have heard of that school a few years prior to founding St. Edward's. So we're actually a sister school with Notre Dame, as well as other Holy Cross universities and colleges around the country, including the University of Portland, Stonehill College outside of Boston, and a few others as well. So we're very proud of our Holy Cross tradition, and I think among all of the Holy Cross colleges, each of us has a unique interpretation of Holy Cross education. The primary tenet of Holy Cross education is that the mind will not be educated at the expense of the heart. So very much what Mallory was just saying, service and kind of doing good works, if you will, and however you want to express those good works is very much kind of a core tenet and a core value of our institution. We do offer Mass on campus a couple of times on Sundays. Usually there's a morning Mass and an evening Mass. I think the evening Mass is more well attended than the morning Mass. As you can imagine on a college campus, the evening Mass is pretty popular. But we also have Mass throughout the week on a daily basis. That's of course optional. Students do not have to attend Mass. They're under no obligation to attend any religious services, but it is available for students who want to participate. And for students of other faith traditions, we do celebrate Passover and Eid and a number of other activities and religious traditions kind of throughout the year on our campus as well. So just a little further information for you about the tradition, specific tradition connected to St. Edward's University. We do have time for a few more questions. If there are any, please feel free to drop them in before we sign off here. I thank you guys for joining us. I hope that this has been helpful. I certainly commend you all for being very eager beavers and getting a big head start over your classmates and getting started on thinking about your application for admission for this next fall, and getting a head start working on it. So it's been a pleasure to talk with you today. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mallory as well to close. But if you do have any other questions, now's the time to go ahead and enter them.
Yeah, I echo everything that Dinah said. Kudos to all of you for getting a head start on your application. You know, I think it's great to be going ahead and thinking about it as you get started, even at this stage. One thing that I really hope that you take away from this process, even though we're having to do this socially distant via Zoom, I hope that you take away from this that we really want to work with you, and you know, we're approachable people, or at least we try to be. If you have questions throughout the process, if you want to know more about the application process or about St. Edward's, we do this job because we like working with all of you, and so we will be more than happy to hear from you and hear more about your interests too, and what you want to do in college and what you're excited about. So please do reach out to us if there's anything else that we can help provide. But thank you everyone so much for being here today, and we hope to see you on campus at some point in the future, whether it's for a visit or if you join us as a Hilltopper.
Thank you guys. We'll be sending a survey following this webinar, so please do take some time to give us some feedback. Let us know what was helpful for you. And as Mallory mentioned kind of earlier in the presentation, we will be hopefully welcoming visitors on campus again starting in mid-August. So you can keep a watch on our website, stedwards.edu/visit, for additional virtual opportunities as well as in-person opportunities once we're able to bring visitors back to campus and keep them safe and healthy, and also make sure that we get you the information you need. So whether you're connecting with us in person or in the virtual realm, email or text or phone call, we're here to help you throughout this process. I know it's been a challenging few months for all of us. I thank you for taking the time to join us today. And I hope that you and your families all continue to be healthy and well. Take care of yourself, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the Hilltop very soon. Go Hilltoppers. Thanks, you guys.